Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new build video with me, Sherman. Today we are taking a look at the Northern Wind tank. This is the ice tank build I released last update, and a few updates back I released the original version of this, and I've kind of gone back to its original iteration with some modifications and some changes in the gear choices. But I think that this one works out a lot better with survivability, damage output, CC, all that kind of stuff, the things that it was made to do. So it works out really well. So let's go ahead and get into it, and let me know what you guys think. So starting off, we're going to take a look at the stats. We are a high elf warden for this, and the main reason why I chose high elf is high elves also get a 4% extra to frost damage, and this build does definitely do a lot of frost damage. So as you can see, we have 64 into magicka, we have a 33k max magicka, we have a 31k max health, 16k stamina, we have a 1k almost magic recovery, which is pretty much right there on the edge of perfect. We do have a 1982 spell damage with a 33% spell crit. We do have a 20,000 spell resist with a 20,000 physical resist. And then moving on down here, we are sitting with a tri-stat food. We do not have a Mundus Stone for this, and the reason I haven't chosen a Mundus Stone was because I wasn't really sure what would be best for it, but I think the ritual would be a good one, mainly because, not the ritual, sorry, not the mage, the lover, not the lord, not the lady, the Antronach, that's the one. But the Antronach would be actually the best Mundus Stone for it because of the extra magic recovery, because this build really needs that extra magic recovery. And when you use a pot, that way you go up to almost a 1500 magic recovery. This is going to give you really good magic sustainability on this build. So that's kind of what you need, is really good magic sustainability. So let's go ahead and take a look back in here. Again, so we do use the Antronach Mundus Stone. We are using tri-stat food. Going over here, we are going to take a look at that. We are using longfin pasty and melon sauce food. As you can see, 4k max health, 4k stamina and magicka, almost 4.5k max health, which is really good. And then we are using the Crown Store tripods for this build right now because we are on PTS. On live, you are just going to want to use the tri-stat pots. They give you health, magicka, stamina. They give you about 9,000 health, 7,000 magicka and stamina, and then the 20% magicka, stamina, and health recovery, which is really just overall beneficial. So going over the sets, very much like Death's Wind, Northern Wind is built very similar in the fact that it does use Ice Heart, because Wardens don't have a natural shield, and using Bone Shield for this doesn't really work. So using this to give you a damage shield works out really well, especially at the fact that it's a 9k damage shield that procs on a 20% chance anytime you deal critical damage. So that's another reason why we have a high crit here, but also because of the way our skills are set up, we can also get a little bit more crit when we're on our back bar. That can help us proc crits, and proccing those crits can help us proc the monster set. So that's why we're using Ice Heart. And as you can see, Ice Heart gives you extra spell crit, and then on top of that, it gives you extra damage, frost damage. So it does 1,047 frost damage to all enemies every second for 6 seconds. It's pretty decent, and with a 20% chance, the Ice Heart will proc quite a bit, so it gives you a nice damage shield most of the time. The next set we're using is something people are really familiar with when it comes to magic damage dealers, and that is Julianus. Now, I looked at a lot of other sets for this build, but Julianus is an amazing set. The only set that comes close to Julianus in comparison would be Combat Physician. But Combat Physician's really built for a healer, even though it can work for this tank because you can use one of your abilities to heal yourself, and that will proc that shield on you quite a bit. But I prefer Julianus because of the extra spell damage and the extra spell crit, because the more you crit, the more Ice Heart will proc. Moving on, we are also using Plague Doctors with this build. I like Plague Doctors for off-tank builds because it gives you just the amount of health you need to reach those high health pools to make the builds really viable. So that's why we're using the Plague Doctors with this. So on the gear here, we are using a medium helm, heavy chest, or infused helm, infused chest, infused legs, and then on the gauntlets and the boots, they're reinforced in Nirnhoned, and same with the belt and the shoulders are reinforced in Nirnhoned. Reinforced on the shoulders and the boots, Nirnhoned on the gloves and belt. This is going to give you the most resistances that you can use. Now we are using ice stabs, so we do get the block passive, which is really good, but you're not going to be blocking all the time because you're going to be heavy attacking a lot, because that's where your taunt is. So you're going to be doing heavy attacks every 15 seconds roughly to keep taunt applied. The next thing we're doing is on our 2 jewelry pieces down here, we do have 2 spell damage, and then we have 1 magic recovery and an infused slot. And on this set, we are using healthy. You could use Trirune here, but you don't really need that much stamina. 16k is good for this build because you're mainly using the stamina for dodge rolling and breaking free. Moving on to the 2 weapons, we are using 2 ice stabs, and with them, both infused, and we should have those weapon enchants on here. Let me go ahead and grab those. With it, you're going to want to use weakening enchants. Now, the reason for weakening is because when you apply the chilled status effect from your abilities from the Warden and from your ice wall, you'll have a greater chance of proccing chilled on the enemies. When you proc chilled, you will also apply minor maim. And then when you put weakening on top of that, it also reduces their damage by a lot. This is why this works really good with ice tanking, or anyone using a Warden ice tank type character, like the Death's Wind, or, for example, the Northern Wind. You can proc chilled quite a bit, and keeping chilled applied to your enemies is really good. Another thing you can do is use frost enchants with the infused, so you can get that greater chance of applying chilled to the enemies. But I prefer the weakening. So this works out really good for this setup. And I apologize it didn't have everything 100% done. I had to remake the character though, because for some reason I keep losing my transmutation stones, so I couldn't transmute the gear. So I'd have to remake the character, and I just forgot to put it back on there. So let's go ahead and take a look at the skills. Make sure you fill out all your class passives, your weapon passives, your armor passives that are necessary, like light armor, you want the top 3, medium armor, you want the top 2, and the bottom 1. On heavy armor, you're going to want all of them, because you are a heavy armor build. You can get the soul magic ones if you want the 2 that I usually fill out, and then when it comes to Fighters Guild, you definitely want to try and get Banish the Wicked. On Mages Guild, you're going to want Persuasive Will and Magicka Controller, because on the back bar, you are using Inner Light to give you boosted max magicka. Psijic Order, Elemental Weapon is a skill you can use, or you can use Deep Thoughts. I like Elemental Weapon preferably because I like to get a little bit of extra out of my character when it comes to having that ability to deal some extra damage, because I'm not always tanking. So bringing in a little bit of extra damage kind of helps. Then you want to make sure that you fill in all of the passives here. Like I said, guys, when I went through and remade this character, I just forgot to fill things in. But the main reason why you want to use a Psijic Order ability is so you can get Concentrated Barrier and Deliberation. Both of these help a lot, especially if you're using Deep Thoughts. Deep Thoughts will give you the Deliberation passive for damage reduction, and then the Concentrated Barrier will give you the damage shield. So either one will give you the damage shield. Moving on to Undaunted. Both Undaunted passives, and then we're going to skip the Alliance War. We're just going to go into racials. You're going to want to get all the racials here, because all these racials play really well with this build. Moving on to the crafting, alchemy, medicinal use, and then with provisioning, gourmand and connoisseur. Moving over the skills now, on the bar here, we do have elemental weapon. Like I said, I really like this ability for this, because it does have a chance of applying chilled, burning, or concussed. So it can, a lot of ways it can help out with your group in creating better DPS. The next thing we have here is Arctic Blast. This is a heal, but it also does frost damage to the enemies around you, and it has a 200% chance to apply chilled. So this is how you're going to keep chilled applied on your enemies, is through Arctic Blast, and then the next ability, Gripping Shards. Both of these are based off of your max health for damage, So the higher your max health is, the more damage these do. But we don't want to go too high in our health, because we don't need that much damage from these abilities, because we're not there to be DPS. We're there to use this to apply chilled to the enemies to slow them down and keep minor maim applied. And the next ability we have on our bar is Shimmering Shield. This is a damage mitigation ability. It also grants us major heroism whenever one of our shields, or whenever we absorb a projectile. So whenever we absorb a projectile, we get major heroism. And it also restores 595 magicka. So it's kind of nice. The next thing we have is Elemental Drain. Now you can go with either this one or the other morph for this, which will give you a consistent uptime of the Major Breach. And this is how this build works. This build can work, now I want to go over this real quick before I go any further. This build can work in almost all dungeons in this game, and all trials, as an off tank in trials, as a main tank in dungeons. And when you use this ability, you have to reapply it every 24 seconds. But if you use the other one, you never have to reapply it. The nice thing about this is this gives you magicka back, and it makes this tank work really good in a magicka based group. So because of that Major Breach that this does. Major Breach is essential for this build, so that's why we have it here. Also, you get minor magicka steal to the enemies for 24 seconds, causing you and your allies to restore 300 magicka every 1 second when damaging them. Now, if you have a healer in your group who can apply this for you, and they are willing to do that, you can swap this ability out for Deep Thoughts. So that way you have a way of gaining resources back without having to heavy attack too much. The next ability we have on our bar is Northern Storm. This is very essential to this build. This is something you are going to use quite a bit, not all the time, but quite a bit in dungeons mostly. And that's because it just deals a lot of damage, and it also reduces movement speed of enemies by 70%, and it has a chance, a 200% chance to apply chilled to all the enemies in that 10-meter radius. But it also gives you and your allies major protection, reducing damage taken by 30%. When you have this plus the minor maim, which is 15%, that's 45% reduced damage incoming. And then on top of that, you also have that 456 reduced weapon and spell damage on your enemies. So it's beneficial overall. Next up on the back bar, we have Frozen Device. Frozen Device is a pull. So you can set this down, and you can set it down in 3 areas, a total of 3 of these, and it can pull enemies to you. And it also does damage and applies major maim to them. So you get that major maim plus that minor maim. Sorry, this is the major minor maim. The other one's the damage reduction. This is damage reduction. And this is the maim. So this will be actually make your minor maim and the major maim do 45% for 4 seconds. So that's really beneficial for you and your group to mitigate damage effectively. Now, this does not work on bosses, but it works on most, if not all, minor trash and stuff in dungeons and in trials. Next up, we have Blockade of Frost. This is just there to CC, because this chilled enemies will become frozen in this. So when you have these 2 abilities down, you will be freezing or chilling your enemies, which will make them immobilized for 4 seconds while they're in this. So you want to keep this down pretty much all the time. While this is down, this can also proc the weapon enchant, the weakening enchant, and keep it up consistently. Next ability on our bar is Blue Betty. This is for magic return. It also increases our spell damage. And we do have another ability we can swap this out for, which is in the green balance, which is Lotus Blossom. This is an excellent ability to use because it does healing, and it also gives us increased spell critical. So this is actually almost better to have, the Lotus Blossom, than the Blue Betty. The only reason why I chose the Blue Betty is because a lot of people like to use the Blue Betty for the magic recovery, but because of how this build works and how much magic recovery you already have, you don't really need it. Next up, we have Ice Fortress. And Ice Fortress is our major ward, major resolve buff. This increases spell and physical resistance by 5,280. This gives us a 2,500 spell and physical resist. Plus, it gives us minor protection, reducing incoming damage by 8% for 24 seconds. Next ability on our bar is Inner Light. If we don't have Inner Light here, with the way this is here, we won't be able to maintain a high magicka when we swap bars. If you watch real quick, I start at 33,543. When I swap, I go to 33,272. That's a good amount of decrease. It's a perfect amount of decrease. So that's why we have this here. It also gives us major proficiency, which we don't really need when we have this going, but having this here gives us that extra magicka we need to sustain it on the back bar. The last but not least, we do have Aggressive Warhorn. This is to boost our group's max magicka, max stamina, and health by 10% for 30 seconds. And it also gives us Major Force, increasing our critical damage by 15% for 9.5 seconds. So I'm just going to show you real quick a little bit about this before I go into the CP, so you guys can see for yourselves. So we're going to pop our Ice Cloak. We're going to pop this, the Blossom, our Wall, and then flip bars, and then we're going to light attack right off the bat. Do this, and then heavy attack, and then do a light attack, keep these up, and then you're going to just basically heavy attack, like I said, to keep that taunt. You can see it up there. It says we have 12 seconds left of it. You're going to want to keep that up as much as possible, but you're also going to want to keep this and this up so you can keep Shield applied, and then your Wall. These are things you want to keep up all the time, along with the other stuff. So you're going to be heavy attacking, like I said. You don't have to heavy attack all the time, but if you do want to heavy attack, it's a really good trade-off. So as you can see, your Lotus Blast heals for an insane amount because of all the healing received we have with this spell, which we'll get into right now. So moving on to the CP, starting with the red tree, we have 66 in Ironclad. This reduces your direct damage taken by 22%. We take a lot of direct damage in PvE, so this is really good for us. Moving on over here, we have 56 in a Hardy and Elemental Defender. This reduces poison, physical, and disease damage. This reduces Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 12% on both of them. When you add this with the Frost Cloaks, 8%, that's a 20% damage reduction. Then you add in things like this, which is just 22, and that's a 42% damage reduction. Then you add in something like the Major Maim, which is a 30% reduced damage they can do. Then you add that to it, and you add Minor Maim, and you add Weakening. By the end, you are taking very little damage from your enemies because of it. We have 23 into Thick Skin, reducing damage taken from damage over time effects by 10%. Also very helpful. Moving on over here, we have 40 into Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your shield strength by 16%. This is necessary. This is 40 points. Then we have 19 into Quick Recovery. This increases healing received by 5%. When you stack that with the 8% from Heavy Armor, the 5% from this, the 4%, it's something like 16-17% mitigation or healing received. Then you add in that heal that you have, the Arctic Blast, which heals you for 10% of your max health. It pays off. And then Lotus Blossom on top of that. You have a lot of healing. Moving on to the green tree, 56 in a Warlord reduces the cost of your break free by 20%. This saves you a ton in resources, guys. Ton. So make sure you do this. 13 in a Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 8%. 23 in a Bashing Focus, reducing your bash cost by 14%. Over here in the middle green tree, we have 43 in Arcanus. This increases your magic recovery by 10%. When you add this with the Wood Elf or High Elf's 10% natural recovery, that is a 20% magic recovery. So it's nice. And then we have 43 into Tenacity. This increases magic magic return from our fully charged heavy attacks. This is how we get a lot of our resources back, is through heavy attacking. Moving on, we have 56 in the Shadow Ward. This reduces the cost of block by 20%, and then 26 in the Tumbling, reducing our dodge roll by 11%. Because you will be dodge rolling as a tank. As you can see, like, that's not very much. Now, when you add in the dodge roll negative effect, then it goes up. But when your dodge roll negative effect wears off and you dodge roll, it's only like 2k. So it's not too bad in the resources. So that's why we have that 26 here. Moving on over here, we have 43 and a Bless. This increases healing done. So this affects Lotus Blossom and our Arctic Blast on ourselves. So when you add that 10% to all the healing received we have, we actually get really good outgoing and incoming heals. Moving on to the middle tree, or sorry, before we move on to the middle tree, we have 66 in Elfborn. This increases critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 22%. We have 43 in the Elemental Expert. This increases Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. With the 4% for being a High Elf, that's a 14%, and the 6% for being a Warden, we actually have a 20% frost damage increase. So that's really, really beneficial to us. On top of that, we have 12 in Spell Erosion. This gives us increased spell penetration by 1191. When you add this on top of the Crusher, or the Major Breach, you actually have like a 6k penetration. So that's really good. Now, most of the times when you're in a trial, you're going to have another tank, a main tank, and that main tank is going to be using Crusher enchants most of the time. So that Crusher enchant, along with this, along with your penetration, is almost a 9k penetration. So you're getting a decent amount out of it. Moving on over to the middle tree, we have 40 into Master at Arms. That's mainly here for a reposit if we block an attack. As you can see, it's not very effective as it is for a stamina character. We also get Retaliation, which means whenever we block a heavy attack, our next light attack used within 7 seconds deals 30% additional damage. If you time it right, you block a heavy attack, you activate your elemental weapon and then hit that light attack is going to do insane amount of damage. Plus you're going to get to proc this magic damage. So it's really kind of a fair trade-off. Moving on to the final and last of the blue trees, we have 56 in Thaumaturge. This increases damage done with damage over time effects by 20%. Now, I know that the 2 ice abilities we use from the Warden class do not get boosted by this, but Wall of Elements does. So that's why we have this here. And that is it for CP. Let's go ahead and take this over here to our favorite testing trial, Maw of Lorkhaj, and I will show you guys this in action so you guys can see for yourself how well this thing can mitigate damage and how well it can sustain and how well it can pretty much just be what I said it could. An off tank in a trial or a main tank in a main trial. Now, this does not use the extra taunt from the Undaunted line. This actually, you use the taunt only from your ice staff itself. It takes some time to get used to, but once you have it down, it becomes a very effective weapon when it comes to tanking. It's not quite as easy as Sword and Board, but it is as effective if you know how to use it. So let's go ahead and take a little trip inside here, and you guys can see, like I said, for yourselves how well this can work. It is a really fun build when you know how to play it, and you see how effective it can be in group play. Like I was running a dungeon, my first time ever playing this build, I was running a dungeon, and I remember the group was just like, wow, you know, this is crazy. Because they didn't think it was going to be that good. So apply that to one of them. Heavy attack. You guys can already see right now, like, I'm not taking any damage because of how much stuff I have going on. I'm going to go ahead and drop that over here so I can pull him to me. Now I have them all grouped up on me right now. All the enemies in this place. So and almost every single one of them has chilled applied to them because of all the ice effects I have going on. So, and all the ones that just popped up with immobilized had chilled on them. So you saw that, like 4 of them. And that really can help out in the group because it keeps that minor maim applied to them. The more minor maim you have applied to your enemies, the better off you are. Now, I can do this, but I'd be dodge rolling a lot and trying to avoid damage to mitigate a lot of this damage. So I'll just go ahead and do it. And I'll show you guys how that ice well thing doesn't work on all enemies. As you can see, I just put it down and it didn't pull that enemy to me. So I love that heal. It heals so well. Oops, wrong one. And now, most of those enemies already have shield applied to them, which is kind of crazy. Because, like I said, it just reduces their outgoing damage to me. Go over here. We're going to do this again. But I can sit here all day, guys, and just sit here and fight these people. If I wanted to. But I'm not going to. I'm going to let them kill me. But you can already see how well the mitigation works on this build. Like, I wasn't really taking a whole lot of damage because I could mitigate most of it through the shields, through the healing, all that stuff. So, but that's pretty much the build, the Northern Wind. I hope you guys like it. I love this build. This is by far one of my favorite builds I've ever made besides the Avenger build, or what I used to call the Knights Templar build, and then before that I called Meridia's Guardian. But a lot of that stuff's changed over time, and yeah. But this is the new Northern Wind. I hope you guys like it. I love this build. This is by far, hands down, my second favorite build to play. So, like I said, I hope you guys like it. If you do, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds or other videos by me, you can hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.